Welcome everyone to our second forum regarding the Northwest Local School District Master Planning effort. We appreciate your making time to join us tonight and wanted to give Superintendent Yater a chance to say hello.
Thanks, Jeff. I just want to welcome everyone to tonight's forum and thank you for making time for this important topic. And I'm excited to share the outcome of the process we've been in with our community advisory team and our educational visioning team. And I'm excited for everyone to hear the work that's been going on and where we are. So I just want to thank you sincerely from the team for making time and being here for this important meeting. And then at the end, we'll kind of talk about next steps and the ask we're going to have for all of you to help us amplify and extend this message beyond as far as possible. So welcome. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Jeff so we can get right into the content.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Daryl. My name is Jeff Parker. I'm an educational planner with SHP, a leading design firm here in the state. We work with districts all over the region, and we've been working with Northwest for the last several years, but most extensively over the last couple of months in this master planning effort. Many of you have been a part of that effort, and we appreciate it. This is a brief agenda. We're gonna talk about the 2014 master plan. We're gonna talk about the process and the timeline that we've been working under recently. We're gonna review the condition of the existing facilities. We're gonna talk about enrollment. And finally, we're gonna present some master plan concepts to you, okay? We also have an online form, a virtual form by which you can submit your questions. It'll help us to keep a long-term record of them. And I believe that has been made available to you in the chat window. Jen, I don't know if we can reissue that chat so everyone can get it again.
Sure.
Might be handy though.
Just sent it.
Great, so that should pop up. So as you're listening to the presentation tonight, if there are questions that arise, make note of them there and submit that at the end of the presentation. We'll be sure to address those. Also, for your use, we've created this web tool, northwest.shp.com. It houses all of the documentation that has been created so far, all of the meeting presentations that we're going to be talking about. So if you have questions about how we arrived, how the master plan, why the master plan landed where it has, this is the place to go. So please share that with your friends and take full advantage of that. Mr. McKee, would you mind bringing us up to speed on the 2014 master plan and kind of where we are today?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and good evening, everyone. I just want to kind of give a brief recap of a bond levy that was passed roughly 7 years ago in 2014. So a similar process was conducted with the district and the community. And out of that process came the building of 3 new elementary schools, which are 21st century buildings. Also in that plan, it shows that the next plan in 2014 was to also replace the Coleraine Elementary School and the middle school. So that's why we're here today, is just to make sure that we re-engage with the community and make sure that's still the plan that the community wants to move forward with. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting information ahead for you and some decisions that we need to make as we move forward.
Great. Thank you, Mr. McKee. To really start, we thought it would be valuable to bring everyone up to speed on kind of how the district is organized today. The vertical gray bars here represent all the grade levels district-wide. starting with preschool on the far left to 12th grade on the far right. And then the colored bars, horizontal bars, represent different school buildings in the district. So we've got the school building, the name of the school, along with the student population. And the T denotes the population today. And take, for instance, Coleraine Elementary School, population of 578 today with a capacity of up to 750. So that's what all these numbers mean. I would like to draw your attention to the white lines, and those indicate kind of the progression of a student through the school district. And you can see that Coleraine, Montford Heights, and Struble, those all feed up into Coleraine Middle and White Oak Middle School, and they feed into Coleraine High School. Pleasant Run Elementary School, of course, feeds into Pleasant Run Middle and Northwest High School. So the outlier here is Taylor Elementary School. It has what we would call a split population, meaning that some of the kids, when they go from 5th grade to 6th grade, will go into the Coleraine High School feeder system, and some of the kids will go into the Northwest High School feeder system. So that creates some challenges from an educational and community standpoint that we're going to talk about a little bit further. So you might hear us use the term clean feeders. So for instance, Coleraine Elementary School is a clean feeder into Coleraine Middle School, which is a clean feeder into Coleraine High School, whereas Taylor is not a clean feeder because it splits. So that's a wordy explanation, but hopefully that makes a little more sense to you as we go on. So a little bit about the timeline. We started in early August, and we started with a community forum to kind of bring your neighbors, yourselves and your neighbors up to speed on the process and the state of the buildings. We also have had 2 groups composed of your neighbors. One is the educational visioning team, and one is the community advisory team. Both of them have met 3 times during August and September to develop the plans that you're going to see tonight for a total of 6 meetings. And we are here at the 2nd community forum, and we are about to embark on the community survey. With all of that in hand, we hope to present this information to the Board of Education with a recommendation on the appropriate master plan. In our experience, we've learned that any school district facility master plan is kind of like a 3-legged stool. It has to do all of these things very well. It has to be educationally appropriate. It has to be community supported, and it has to be financially responsible. Depending on your seat in the district, we could probably debate on which comes first or which is the most important. But without all 3 of these legs in place, the plan will not work. So you'll see us refer to this several times. As I mentioned, there is an educational visioning team composed of your neighbors, as well as teachers and students. And their role was to kind of look to the future of teaching and learning and try to discern what teaching and learning needs to look like for Northwest schools. A lot of that work had already been done, or a lot of the groundwork for this effort had been done with the Portrait of a Graduate, as well as the educational framework that has been developed. This team, the educational visioning team, created 4 big ideas that they thought were imperative for any master plan. They wanted to have expanded academic offerings for our students. They were really concerned about operational efficiency, making the most of what the district has available. They wanted to create schools that foster relationships. And that has a lot to do with, the way the buildings are organized, sometimes with a school within a school to kind of minimize the overall feel of the building. And finally, district-wide equity, so that, a second grader going to school in one building has the same experience, has access to the same offerings, has similar facility benefits as a second grader in a different building. So equity was a really important piece of this puzzle. The other group was the community advisory team, again composed of folks from the district as well as your neighbors. And their role was to really kind of wade through all the nitty-gritty details of these various plans, and really understand the financial implications. How are the facilities performing today and what needs to occur in them? All these sorts of deep dive realities they needed to come to grips with and develop a series of master plans. If you have questions about any of these two groups, again, I would refer you back to that website. All of their meetings are archived there for your use. The community advisory team had identified 4 values that were really important to them. And you'll see that there's some overlap in these, which is really encouraging to see. But this idea of instructional excellence, wanting Northwest to be the best place for our kids, exceptional student opportunities, equity, again, that idea of equal educational access, and finally, great learning environments. So those are the 4 values that the CAT team identified as being drivers. So the community advisory team developed 14 various options that were all evaluated, costed. We studied over them, and also the educational visioning team reviewed them and spoke into and offered their opinions on them. As I mentioned, we developed the Northwest values and kind of wove into the master planning effort the educational vision. So the consensus that came out of all that effort, there were 5 ideas or 5 goals that or givens or assumptions, if you will, that we're starting with. We need to address the buildings with the greatest need first. District-wide equity is of primary importance. There was a preference, especially from the educational visioning side, for a 6 to 8 middle school. We discussed the prospect of maybe doing a junior high school or maybe a 7-9 solution, but really from a teaching and learning perspective, the 6-8 middle school was the best answer. I mentioned the clean feeder solutions, and that was really preferred as well. Having elementary schools that have populations going to different high schools and different middle schools creates some real challenging dynamics amongst the students that can be avoided if we use clean feeders. And finally, we wanted to minimize student transitions. So we're not changing school buildings any more than we absolutely have to. So again, that's kind of the consensus, the starting point for the plans that you're going to see.
So as you can expect, all this comes at a cost. And to do this type of work, then we have to run what's called a bond levy. There's another kind of levy called an operating levy, which you may be familiar with also. And that's what's used to for the continuation or operation of the school buildings throughout the year. But what we were looking at with the community, we wanted to make sure that the community understood that the bonds from the 1997 construction of the Montford Height Elementary and some other renovations will be rolling off in December of 2022. So we wanted to make sure that the community was aware of that and ask if it was important that we take advantage of that. Just so you know what that looks like, for a home costing $100,000, it would be roughly $40.25 per year. For home costing $250,000, it would be $163 a year, $100.63 a year. Sorry about that. So this would raise us roughly $40 million, which would be repaid over 35 years. And I also just want to make sure that these are just estimated values at this time, as this will fluctuate.
Great. And Chris, when we talk about home valuation, that's not necessarily a retail valuation. That's a valuation assessed by the county, correct?
That is correct. So you can take a look at your tax bill and see what that valuation is, and use this to calculate what that would be.
Great. Thank you. All right, so that's kind of where we've been. That's a lot of the financial realities. So next, we wanted to dig in and kind of talk with you a little bit about the existing facilities. The community advisory team really dug deep into this topic. And again, if you have questions, I would refer you back to the website where all of these are archived. But we've got several columns of information. The first one here is the age of the buildings, and I will reveal that here in a moment. But the tricky one here is what we call facility appraisal, and it takes several things into account. It considers the site, it considers structural and mechanical systems, how easy is the building to maintain, issues like safety and security, educational adequacy, and that has to do with like technology and access to power. And finally, the educational environment. Those of you who have been to the newer elementary schools like Pleasant Run, Struble, and Taylor, you'll notice that they look and feel a little different than some of our older schools. And that is because they're trying to reflect and support a 21st century learning environment. I think Chris used that phrase earlier. So essentially, this facility appraisal, again, is how well it works as a school. And you can see that we've got kind of varying scores. The 3 new buildings are the 300%. They're performing really well. The lower scores are many of the older buildings, because they were really designed to provide education in a different manner. The next one is the renovate replace percentage. And that is essentially, if we compare the cost to renovate the building to the cost to replace it. So for instance, Colerain High School, the very top one here, it would cost 79% of 79% of what it would take to build it new to renovate it. So you've still got the old building, the old bones, you've got new systems, newer environments. So, but you still have an old building. The long-term cost, so if we were to come through and renovate it, everything, that would, for Colerain High School, is $61,800,000. Okay. And that is renovating it to the state school standard. The state has guidelines, and this is not building code or fire code. This is a different thing. So the state has school education guidelines that they have established, and we would be renovating to that level. Finally, the last one is what we call the 5-year warm, safe, and dry maintenance. And that's what it takes just to keep the students warm, safe, and dry in these buildings. And the district has studied and planned how much they need to invest in these buildings over the next 5 years. And you can see these values here. you'll notice that Coleraine Middle School and Coleraine Elementary School are both 0. And that was driven by the decision that made in the 2014 master plan that those buildings were going to be replaced. So the district has been keeping up with them to keep them operational, but not making long-term investments in those buildings.
Jeff, if I can jump in, I also want you to realize that, at that funding rate of $800,000 per year, it would take the district roughly 50 years to take care of all these issues. And that's if nothing else got any worse.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, Chris. Thank you for that. You can see here that you've got buildings, for instance, Coleraine Elementary School and Coleraine Middle. Coleraine Elementary School is coming up on its 100th anniversary. And you can see that it is kind of the lowest scorer on the facility appraisal, similar to Coleraine Middle, built in 1930, and facility appraisal at 46%. So hopefully that gives you a picture of the district's facilities. So we wanted to have a quick conversation with you about renovation versus replacement. So we wanted to just kind of draw back the curtain, if you will, on a particular building. We took as an example Pleasant Run Middle School. It was built in 1969. To renovate it to the state standards, it is just over $20 million. So 17 million of that is to upgrade the systems, to upgrade the finishes, to upgrade the furniture, but then another 2 million for what we would call reprogramming to support 21st century learning. And that is some of those new collaborative and flexible spaces that you're seeing in your 3 new elementary schools, as well as many of your neighboring districts in Hamilton County. And then finally, there's roughly $1 million for what we would call design contingency. So that brings you to a total of $20,100,000 to renovate it. When we compare that to $31 million to replace it, it really creates a moment of pause. And you have to ask yourself, are we throwing good money after bad by renovating buildings to get another 50 years out of them, when we would still have a building that has 50-year-old bones? So, after 100 years, is it money worth spending? So the CAT team and the district kind of concluded that it wouldn't be the best use of the taxpayers' dollars to operate that way. And Phil and Jed, I think someone is writing on my screen and I am unable to get that off. If you could maybe help me clean that up. I don't know if you can. We also did an enrollment projection update, and we wanted to share that with you. There are several trends going on across the state and across the country. So what we are seeing here in Northwest is not cause for alarm. It's the reality that we're seeing again across the state and across the country. Fewer children per household. We're seeing residents staying in their homes longer. And finally, we're seeing fewer starter families. So families are forming later and less often. So therefore, we're seeing a drop in enrollment. And these are just kind of rough, I've kind of rounded or rolled them into round numbers, if you will. So today at the elementary level, we have 3,900 students. well, I'll just roll to the difference. The orange column here. At the elementary, we're going to be losing 50 students over the course of 10 years. The middle school will be losing a few more, 220. The high school will be losing 420 for a total of roughly 700 students. Again, this isn't something to be alarmed at. It's a trend that we're seeing across the state and the country. It's just the reality of where we are today. So I want to turn now to speak to some of the master plan options. And again, these are the big drivers that I touched on earlier. We need to address buildings with the greatest need first. This idea of district-wide equity with regard to curriculum and the spaces students learn in. A preference for 6-8 middle schools. A preference for a clean feeder organization. You'll remember that's where we're trying to avoid what is happening to the students at Taylor, where they're going kind of splitting when they graduate from 5th grade and going to different middle schools and on to different high schools. Expanded academic offerings, operational efficiencies, and finally schools that foster relationships. So those are the big drivers that we're trying to accommodate in these master plans. So again, we've started with 14 and we've distilled it down to the top 5 that we believe are workable for Northwest schools. All right, option A is 1 middle school and 1 high school. This is organized similar to that earlier chart where the vertical gray columns are the grade levels and the horizontal boxes are the school buildings. So this is proposing a new Colerain Elementary School and a renovated Montfort Heights. All elementary students going to a single large middle school, and then moving on to a single large high school with career tech. Okay. So the obvious question becomes, well, what does that cost? You know, how much is all this? So regarding timing and cost, we kind of divided it into 2 categories. The first group is what we call the greatest physical need. And again, that is Colerain Elementary School and replacement of Colerain Middle School, not necessarily as Colerain, but replacing that and serving all the students in the district with the middle school. The cost of this portion of this phase is $91.8 million, and that translates to 1.59 mils for $91 a year per $100,000 home. And again, we are really trying to focus on this K through 8 segment of the master plan. The reality is that adding in a future new high school or high schools is probably more costly than we anticipate the district is willing to support immediately. So we're trying to break it into smaller chunks.
One brief correction, it's 2.59. There is an error on that slide.
Thank you, Todd.
Yes.
You know what? I'm just gonna correct that. Let's see. Got it? Thank you, Todd. All right, that makes more sense. So again, if we proceed based on not only the greatest physical need, but also based on equity, we would add in the renovations of Montfort Heights. And that would bring us to a total of 106.7 million, 3.01 mils, and $105 per year per $100,000 home. That would leave a future phase to be completed sometime in the future. We don't know when, but a new high school with career tech, a renovation to Houston Early Childhood Center. And then finally, that has a combined total cost of $238.6 million. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that the district has been partnering with the state, starting with the 3 new elementary schools. And the state has been crediting the district dollars that will be returned to the district when their number comes up, when the funds become available for Northwest. And the good news is that that amount is totaling roughly $60 million. So when it does come time to do that last final phase and build that new high school, the state will be contributing roughly $60 million to that effort. All right, so we also wanted to share with you what the CAT team and the educational visioning team saw as potential pros and cons. So the pros for this particular option A is district-wide equity, meaning everyone's kind of got the same thing. They've all got new or newly renovated schools. Everyone's going through the same middle school. Everyone's going through the same high school. It would reinforce community unity by just having a single high school. It certainly supports operational efficiency. The fewer the buildings, the easier it is to operate the district and the more efficient it is. And because you're operating a larger middle school and a larger high school, you can provide more academic offerings in those facilities. Some of the downsides with combining the high schools, the high schools have long, proud traditions and histories. So we acknowledge that would be likely a challenge that would have to be managed. Also, when we have one large high school, it reduces the extracurricular opportunities, both in sports and the arts. One middle school, it's just a lot of kids, a lot of middle schoolers under one roof. So there were some concerns about that. And again, fewer extracurricular opportunities. So that, pardon me, that is option A, one middle school and one high school. All right, next up is option B, 2 middle schools and 1 high school. It is similar to the first one, except that it, as you can see, is proposing 2 middle schools. A new Colerain Middle School with 1,050 students and a new Pleasant Run Middle School with 900 students. I will point out that there is an option or a possibility to connect the new Colerain Middle School to the new Colerain Elementary School. We've done this successfully several times before, where essentially the buildings acts as 2 separate schools, but shares a lot of the main core kind of physical plant facilities. So it's a little more efficient. Wouldn't have to be that way, but it could be connected if the district prefers that. So again, we're focusing on the K through 8th as the area of our next phase. We look at the greatest need, greatest physical need, and that is the new Colerain Elementary and the new Colerain Middle. And that's illustrated here in white. For a total of $68.1 million, 1.92 mil, and $67 per year per $100,000 home. If the district said, you know what, we want to do not only the greatest physical need, but we want to put all the students on the same page as far as new and or renovated schools. We would add the new Pleasant Run Middle School, and we would add the Montfort Heights renovation. And that would bring the total bill to $122 million and 3.47 mil. I'll remind you that, as Mr. McKee mentioned, the district has rolling off or ending at the end of 2022, the current 1997 bond of 1.15 mils. And so the total cost of that, of the equity-based as well as the physical need, is $121 per year per $100,000 home. This would leave the future phase to be determined is the new high school with career tech and the future renovation of Houston Preschool Center. Again, a total combined cost of all phases is $254.8 million, minus the $60 million state credit that would come when it's time to build that new high school. Again, pros and cons from the teams. The single high school really reinforced district-wide equity and community unity, operational efficiency with fewer buildings, broader academic offerings, and they really liked the prospect of the smaller middle schools. The cons, again, were just the challenges that are there because of combining existing high schools. All right, option C, 2 middle schools and 2 high schools. So this one is the same as the previous one with K through 8, okay? Where it diverges is it has created 2 or maintained 2 smaller high schools for 9 through 12, a new Colerain High School with career tech for almost 1,300 kids, and a new Northwest High School with career tech for roughly 1,000 students. Again, focusing on the K through 8 facilities, if we look at the greatest need, that continues to be new Colerain Elementary School and Middle School. Could be connected, but wouldn't have to be. Again, that same 68.1 and $67 per year per $100,000 home. If we were to add in the equity-based need, we would be increasing, we would add to that Montfort Heights renovation, the new Pleasant Run Middle School, for a total of 122.9, 3.47 mils, and $121 per year. That would leave the future phases for the 2 new high schools and the future renovation of Houston. This one comes in at $260.5 million, minus the $60 million state credit. Pros and cons, it maintains the 2 high schools, so it avoids all those challenges of combining. It has 2 smaller middle schools. The cons is that it's really hard to maintain equity across 2 high schools. It continues community division. It's less efficient to operate. And because you're operating 2 high schools, it would create fewer or less broad academic offerings. Option D is 3 middle schools and 1 high school. All right, this is similar to the last one, except what we're doing is we are adding a small White Oak Middle School, and we're doing 1 large high school here, okay? 1 new high school with career tech. Looking at the greatest physical needs, new Colerain Elementary School and new Colerain Middle School. Now you'll notice here that the new Colerain Middle is smaller because we're adding in this future White Oak Middle School. Okay, so that's why these numbers are a little less than the previous options. So comes in at $46.8 million, 1.4 mils for a total of $49 per year per $100,000 home. If we wanted to get all of the kindergarten through 8th graders on the same page from a facility perspective, we would do the new Colerain Elementary School and Middle School, new Pleasant Run Middle School, new White Oak Middle School, so all 3 new middle schools. We would renovate Montford Heights, and all of that would cost $126 million, 3.55 mils, pardon me, and $124 per year per $100,000 home. That would still leave future phases for the new high schools and the Houston renovation. This, because it's more buildings, is I believe the most expensive option we're going to see tonight of $263.6 million. Keep in mind that $60 million credit from the state. So again, the team saw some pros here of maintaining the 2 high schools just helps us avoid all those challenges. The smaller middle schools are easier to manage, but it's harder to maintain district-wide equity. So from one middle school to the other, it's hard to ensure that everyone's getting the same opportunities. With the 2 high schools, it continues that community division. With all these buildings, it's harder to operate efficiently. You have fewer academic offerings across the board. All of the middle schools would be different sizes. So each one is unique. Each one has its own set of challenges. And again, operational inefficiency. All right. So those are the 5 options the team has come up with, has developed. And with that, we really are interested to hear what you think. So we have, I think, shared in the chat box, or will be sharing in the chat box, a link to a survey, and we would like to hear your opinion. We're going to ask you questions, few questions about who you are and where you fit in the district. We're going to ask some kind of overall planning questions, and then we're going to dig into some of the more detail-oriented questions that we've presented to you tonight. So let's see. Jen or Phil, do we have a better way to get this link out to our attendees tonight? Can we do that in the chat?
Yep, I'm gonna get that out to you in just 1 second.
Great. You can also use your phone to scan the QR code if that's easier for you. And again, we're going to leave this survey open until I believe October the 5th. So the district is going to be asking community members to respond in the survey, but we would invite you to share it with your friends and neighbors as well. We are really interested in testing and hearing from the community on what you all feel is appropriate for Northwest schools. Superintendent
Just put that in
Yeager?
there. I just texted that link into the chat, everyone.
Great, thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. I just want to, again, thank everyone for making time. This was a lot of information to digest, and this is being recorded and will be posted to the website that Jeff referenced. You can get to that website by visiting the district website, and there's a link on there for Building Our Future that you can click on and get to the page with archived videos of the team meetings that Jeff referenced earlier. We've worked really hard to develop a strategic plan that lays out the future of our district. to align our portrait of a graduate competencies and our instructional framework to what the community is expecting from the schools. And this is an important next step for us to continue to listen and respond to the community. But we need everyone who is connected to the district, resident, parent, staff member, student, to tell us what they think. We are really hoping that the 150 some people who are on the call with us tonight will talk to their neighbors, their family, their friends. We need this to be amplified throughout the entire district so that people understand that there is a survey out there, that they understand how to get to the information, and that they have the information that they feel they need to make choices on that survey. We really need to hear the input from everyone. So I can't stress it enough that we really want people talking about this, sharing information and asking questions. The more engagement we have, the better information we will have to know our next steps in terms of the direction that the community would like to see the district go, and the way that we can phase this in to make it a reality for our students so that they benefit from the
Please, she's
work that
putting her
we're
name
doing.
out there. I'm so thankful I did not agree to that. I'm like, there's no way.
So I'm really excited to get this information out there and ask everyone to share this as much as they can, give their input, and again, continue to talk about this, engage, ask questions, reach out to anyone from the district, visit the website. But again, please, please, please take the time to review this information, give us your feedback, and share this information as widely as possible. So again, thank you, and we appreciate your time tonight and the engagement that you will continue to have as we move forward. Jeff, do you have anything else?
No, thank you all again for your time. We look forward to hearing from you. Have a great night.